Lesson 5: MVP. Now that you have assessed the market, it's time to work on creating a prototype for your product. In this lesson, you will learn how to turn your idea into something tangible in the form of a minimum viable product, MVP. An MVP is a prototype or basic functioning version of your product or service that you can show to investors, board of directors, people inside of your company, and other potential stakeholders. Remember the story of the ugly duckling? Even baby swans look very unattractive compared to its beautiful parents. The same thing will happen between your MVP and your final shipping product. By the end of this lesson, you will know how to create an MVP the right way. An MVP must showcase some degree of functionality, reliability, usability, and emotional design. These 4 elements will serve as helpful and efficient checkmarks when gaining investors, feedback from the market, and ultimately building out your first end product to release to the public. You wouldn't want to spend thousands decking out your first product with bells and whistles just to find out the market is willing to pay way more for something sleek and minimal. For example, back in 1979, Clairol spent millions releasing a shampoo named Touch of Yogurt to go along with the trend of introducing natural elements to bath products. The shampoo was a massive failure. Turns out the market didn't take well to associating dairy with their hair, and some even tried eating it. If only they had tested their MVP on the market first. Interesting point to note that since then, yogurt has become a very popular natural ingredient in bath and hair products. Unfortunately, Clairol did not get to benefit from it. Creating an MVP is crucial so that you can iterate, modify, change, and adapt the product's functionality, reliability, usability, and emotional design over time as you acquire more customer feedback, market validation, and internal or external resources over time. An MVP is a version of your product, which includes the features that will allow you to release the product to market by solving a core problem for a set of users, also known as your target market. Its purpose is to provide immediate value quickly, while minimizing development costs. It consists of 2 words, minimum and viable. Minimum means nobody quite wants to use it and it doesn't solve the problem. Viable means the ideal product you want to build. Putting minimum and viable together, you build a product good enough to attract the first users. So, when you're approaching the creation of an MVP, you'll want to focus on which features are standard and which are differentiated so as to deliver to some extent the product's value proposition. Therefore, an MVP must showcase some degree of functionality, reliability, usability, and emotional design. What does this actually mean? Imagine for a second that you're aiming to deliver a final product, which is a Tesla sedan-sized electric car. Do you think that the MVP should be a battery-powered skateboard that could take off at 40 miles per hour? Or a single-seater electric car that showcases a remarkable charging speed and long battery life? Most definitely the latter. Why is that? You need to think about your idea and offering in the context of how you can bolt together a version that works well enough so that you can show it to others without them relying exclusively on their imagination. In the electric car MVP example, while the skateboard could have addressed the functionality element, perhaps even the usability, but it couldn't have possibly conveyed the reliability or emotional design for a potential first customer. Hence, bear in mind your MVP has to cover all the bases of the 4 elements: functionality, reliability, usability, and emotional design. Begin by building what is readily available and make your way to more complex things. The way you approach your MVP may differ depending on whether it is a tangible or a non-tangible based product like apps and software. Have you heard of Dropbox? Well, Dropbox wanted to create their own take on the already existing cloud storage market. However, it would have been costly to build out their product, as they would need complexly skilled engineers and lots of time and input. So, they started out with a simple video that essentially showcased what and how their product will work when fully built out. It was specifically targeted at a community of technology early adopters. The 3-minute video seemed like an ordinary demo video to any casual viewer, but to their target market of early tech adopters, the scores of cleverly hidden techie innuendos and dozen or so Easter eggs were not lost, and their MVP took off in a huge way. The rest, as they say, is history. As you can see, an MVP used effectively allows you to gather reliable data without danger of over-engineering the solution, staying true to its root words minimum and viable. Equally astonishing is how the iPhone took off. Steve Jobs presented the next big thing without the audience knowing that half the features were not fully built out or were riddled with bugs. However, giving a very skilled presentation, including a golden path of buttons that Jobs pushed on stage, Apple was able to use its MVP to showcase to the consumers the vision, and then later deliver their promise by executing it. Although this was risky and a novel way to enter the mobile phone market, Apple was able to get feedback on which features potential consumers were excited about and which were superfluous, and then executing on that data and market research through their MVP. Let's say that, surprise, surprise, you too have an idea for a new smart device app. Let's further assume that this app is targeted at teenagers who want a date, but need their parents' permission to do so. The working title of the app is Safe Date. For the sake of learning, let's agree this Safe Date app that you and I are hypothetically creating has key personal data that can be matched with others in the system. Fields that the individual prioritizes as most important to them, such as age, geography, religion, education, hobbies, ethnicity, gender, diet, taste in music and movies, sports, etc. A predictive algorithm that can make sense of all stored data to suggest potential matches. A social networking platform that allows potential dates to correspond safely and securely. A mechanism for asking someone out on a date, and even suggesting a sponsored venue that fits the backgrounds and interests of both individuals. There are many more details required, but the above 5 points is enough to get us started with the basics of the app. Believe it or not, one of the most important first decisions on the path to create an MVP for your Safe Date app has nothing to do with the details of finding your dream date at all. In the beginning, you're going to need to think about, will you build a native app or a web app, such as HTML5? Native means that the application is designed as an application for the operating system on the smart device. A web app is not actually on the smart device, but an icon on the phone launches a web browser on the phone that they then use. Web apps are typically not as robust or elegant. If you go with a native app, which operating system will you first develop the app on? The most common choices are iOS for iPhone, or Android, or Google, or Windows Phone OS, etc. This is a more complicated decision than it might appear at first glance. We can't just pick the operating system we personally use. We should pick the operating system that is most commonly used by our target audience, which brings us back to the previous lesson on knowing your target market. Who will create the user experience? The mock-ups of the way that a user engages the app, the things that they read and the buttons that they push, etc. Who will build the creative elements? All of the things that you see, such as buttons and graphics. Who will do the engineering for the app? All of the things that make it work but you typically do not see? The most challenging part will not be connecting the pipes so that when a button is pressed, the right action happens. The tough bit is going to be the predictive engine that can collate the data into likely matches for potential dates. The better this engine, the happier the customers, and better the reviews, and the more likely that others will sign up for the service. How much money do you have to invest in the creation of an MVP? Budgeting is super important, especially if you have no or limited money. So, what is the purpose of this exercise? Well, before you start hammering out your MVP, you need to collate all this information into a document called a Product Requirements Document, or PRD for short. The PRD describes the product your company will build. It drives the efforts of the entire product team and the company's sales, marketing, and customer support efforts. The purpose of the Product Requirements Document, PRD, is to clearly and unambiguously articulate the product's purpose, features, functionality, and behavior. Don't worry if the PRD doesn't seem complete at this stage. Once you have created a PRD, you should extract only the minimum and viable features that will become your MVP. Typically, you have a limited budget and much to do. You need things to be created, and you might be able to do a few of the things, but there are skills that you lack. You need to find others who can do the work for the highest quality possible for as little money as possible. Seems simple enough, right? Let's introduce a basic business principle of cost, quality, and time. It's very rare to have all three in your favor. Most of the time, at least one of the three needs to be sacrificed to achieve the other two. For example, all factors aside, if you have little or no money, then the most rational outcome is that the quality will be lower and the time to market or MVP will be longer. Conversely, depending on how resourceful you are, if you have a bigger budget or more money, the expectation is that the quality should be higher and the time taken may shorten. Essentially, if you must have high quality, then the cost and time are the price you pay for the quality. If instead, for instance, you must have the MVP by a certain date, then it might typically cost more, but the quality may not be the best, and so on. For your MVP, you need to think what matters most: cost, quality, or time. Once you have the answer to that question, you will need to figure out the balance of the other two and how to make it happen. In the event you're stuck, a simple and effective tool called Prioritization Matrix would be helpful. It is a straightforward approach to determine which features you have to include in your MVP based on two conditions: impact, what value you can deliver right now, and urgency, what your user needs right now. Coming back to the Safe Date app, you should start by fleshing out the details in your PRD. Using the prioritization matrix, define the minimum viable features you need included in your MVP. For instance, you pick an iOS because based on a survey in your school that you identified as a beachhead market, more kids carry iPhones than any other OS. You commit to investing an amount of money from your savings, never more than you can afford to lose. You find a graphic designer for the basic creative elements and software engineer to connect all of the buttons and features to make sure it works. Many first-time founders find using freelancers to do the work keeps costs variable and allows an MVP to be built according to budget. Once you have a functioning app that is reliable, usable, and to some extent basic design, you can start calling for your test group, the volunteers, to give it a try. Make sure that everyone in the initial pilot knows that this is a test of a new system and that you need their full candid feedback so that you can make it better. Do not charge anyone who helps you test the system. Once it is reasonably stable and you have some success stories to go with it, you can take this to an investor as part of your pitch for investment. Answer any objections. At this point, you might be wondering, I don't know what my true product value is. I think my MVP is going to fail. This is exactly why you do an MVP first. The MVP is the validation to see what works and what doesn't. Puzzle things out via the MVP and get things right early. Abandon what doesn't actually work and keep what works and move forward. Another common question is, if I already have a superstar team, can't I just build everything now? It's great that you have a superstar team. That means that building your MVP should be even easier, faster, and better. You still need an MVP. Every baby is born, learns to roll over, push themselves to their knees, learns to stand, takes first steps, and in time runs. No baby comes into the world running in the Olympics. Some might say, can I do this MVP later? Perhaps after I have fully fleshed out the concept, or even after I have raised some money? Sure, but you will raise less money and give away more of the company if you have less evidence and value created in your company. Build as much as possible before raising money. Raise money before if you have no choice, but understand the impact before you go down that path. Investors almost never invest in an idea. They need to see some execution in the form of a prototype or MVP. That shows you're vested in your own idea and willing to go out of pocket if necessary to prove your concept. Many a time, founders say, I already have a customer signed up. Can I just build the final product now? The first step to making sure that the final product is right is to build an MVP first. Test the daylight out of it, and then build the product. Even if you try to jumpstart to the final product, you will go through the early struggling stages anyway. This step happens whether you like it or not. Test on a group that is not paying you money. Give the paying customer the best so that you don't end up apologizing for using them as guinea pigs. Explain consequences of inaction. Empty-handed presentations are okay for starting the conversation, but there will always be a point when you will be asked to show or prove something you can validate. An MVP allows the investor or consumer to see with their own eyes, or in the case of software, with a touch of their fingers to log in and click around to see the magic happen. An MVP makes the idea more defensible than it would otherwise be if it were just an idea on a PowerPoint. Another reason why startups fail is failure to launch. If you don't build some type of functioning demonstration model or video, then there will be a point in time when stakeholders stop believing in your vision and start doubting on your ability to deliver on your promises. So, find a customer who cares, prioritize your features, and don't wait around wondering what might happen. Plan. Execute on a test version of what you want to accomplish and get on with it. To recap, an MVP is a minimum viable product that is a basic prototype and statement of proof that gives people a fundamental understanding that what you envision is in fact possible. Don't worry if you don't know how to do it. You might be able to buy off-the-shelf products that can be put together or hire someone on a freelancing site to show how a completed product might work. So, what are you waiting for? Get ready to test your market with your MVP and dazzle investors.